and then she brought him over beer and spinach, which I think is a courting maneuver if you're German. I'm not sure. The world was introduced to Anna Hahn when she was arrested following a trip out west to Colorado Springs. And when that happened, there was an immediate flood of information about her. And normally when I tell these kinds of stories, it's pretty easy to keep it linear. And I normally have about 3,000 words in my personal notes that I then condense down and tell you. I stopped taking notes at 10,000 words. So this is a big and this is a deep story, but to avoid this kind of fate, I am cutting it down. I am cutting it down. Ooh, what did I just do? That might have just exploded. So we're just going to talk about a handful of her victims. We're going to skip the trial completely. We're just going to do our best, okay? And before we get too far into it, this is a disclaimer. You are going to hear words like aged and elderly and frail, and then you're going to hear ages like 63 and 64 and 67. And I'm just saying, it's not my fault that in the 1930s, which is when this happened, those words were applicable. Okay, so Anna traveled to the United States in 1929, and she was visiting an aunt and an uncle. And when she got here, she left a son in Germany. She traveled here. Shortly after she got here, she said, oh, my husband back in Germany has died, so I'm going to go ahead and stay here. I'm going to live with my aunt and uncle. And she went out to German dances and she met people in the neighborhoods, and she ended up meeting a man named Philip Hahn, and they got married. And her one condition for them being married was that she had to be able to bring her son from Germany. And so the record you're seeing right here behind me is the record of her traveling with her son from Germany back to the United States. You can see in the yellow, it's Anna Hahn, and then her son was Oscar, and he had her maiden name, which is Filzer. And so they come back here, and that sort of brings us back to our current time. That's the kind of backstory I want you to have on her. And so there she is again, and this is on the day that she was arrested. And so in July, she takes a train trip to Colorado Springs, and she takes her son Oscar with her. He's 5 years old at the time, and she's in her early 20s, 24, 25. That's Colorado Springs on a postcard in 1930, so right around the same time she traveled there. Now, when she got home from Colorado Springs, the Colorado Springs police called Cincinnati and said 2 rings were stolen from the hotel where she was staying, and there was a warrant out for her arrest, and could they please go find her and arrest her? And she was memorable to them for 2 reasons. And the first was, she was traveling with her son. And so where these rings were pawned, the pawn shop owner remembered a young woman traveling with a young boy, and it matched her description. The second reason she was memorable is she traveled there with an old man who died suddenly, and then she abandoned his body. One of those things is maybe more memorable than the other. So the Colorado police don't have an official identification for this person who died in a Colorado hospital. He was taken to the hospital by Anna, and when she was asked to please identify him, she said, why would you ask me that? This man is a total stranger to me. And so that man, his name was George Obendorfer, and he was a cobbler, which always makes me think of the Keebler elves, but it's not a Keebler, it's a cobbler. So he mended shoes. He may have been magically delicious, we don't know, but now he's dead in Colorado. And so when she's asked about him, she says, I don't know her, right? Same energy as Mariah Carey. This is a joke for millennials, and there's only ever 10 millennials in here when I make jokes. Thank you. All right. But so she met him in a very meet cute kind of way. She broke a heel outside of his shop. She went inside. They became friends. And so her original story was that they met on the train out to Colorado. And so she said they're on the train, they're both Swiss, and so they bonded over that. I imagine it was how much they love cake rolls. They just have the best cake rolls. My dad's like, no, bad joke. I don't get it. Okay. So the issue with this is that it was a very obvious lie because he had been reported missing by his family and some of his friends. And his family and friends said, oh, he recently met a young woman, and he was talking about how this trip out to Colorado was their honeymoon. And he was saying he was like a young man again. And so they knew that they were traveling together. And so they come back to her and they say, hey, listen, we have all these statements. We know that you knew him. And she says, okay, I knew him, but not that well. And it was happenstance that we both traveled to Colorado at the same time. We met each other on the train, and it was a happy coincidence. The problem with that is she forgot to tell her son to lie when he was asked if they were traveling together. It's always the kids. Oh my God, it's like Scooby-Doo. Those kids. Okay. And so her son says, oh, we went to Union Terminal together. She bought 3 tickets for us. We sat in separate cars on the train going out of Cincinnati, I presume in case anyone they knew was on that train, which its first stop was Chicago, so probably a pretty popular line for people traveling. And then after Chicago, they started truly kind of traveling together. It was said that he was somewhat ill on the train ride. Oscar, her son, said he remembered he started counting and he got him 18 glasses of water over the course of the train ride because he was so thirsty. And so Anna was known as a nurse. She wasn't a qualified nurse, but she would help and assist people by giving them medicine and sort of tending to them. And so she gave him medicine over the course of this time as well. And then shortly after they arrived in Colorado, she took him to the hospital and left him there, and he died shortly after. So just to be as guilty as possible, she skips town, and on the way back home in Denver, she goes to the bank. She has his bank book with her. She says, I'm Mrs. Obendorfer, and I need this money for my train ride home. And she tries to withdraw $1,000. Big amount, bold amount, right? And they say no. They say that they can't do it. And so she ends up coming back to Cincinnati, and she's arrested once she gets here. And so far, kind of pretty normal-ish murder story, right? I know, but like pretty linear. We know what happened. Investigation. Now we'll have a trial. Then she'll get convicted, right? That's how it goes. Except for this is when things get messy. And so 3 things happen in very quick succession. First, they announce an investigation into the death of Jacob Wagner. Second, George Heiss accuses Anna of grand larceny and signs out a warrant against her. And third, her husband, Philip Hahn, turns a bottle of poison into the police and says, I thought maybe you would ask me for this one day. And so the question is, this is all within a day of her being arrested for stealing jewelry in Colorado, right? So it doesn't seem like it really adds up. How did this happen so fast? It happened so fast because she was already on the police radar because of the death of Jacob Wagner. His friends had reported him missing, said this young woman had been hanging around, and they actually had already started the process to exhume his body before she was ever arrested for these other crimes. The police actually, it said they didn't know about each other's investigations. So the people that went and arrested her for the Colorado robberies, another detective saw her being walked through and said, wait a minute, that's my suspect on this murder. And so that's when they started putting pieces together that she was more of a criminal enterprise all on her own than just maybe someone doing a singular crime. And so going through how this stuff went, that is the exhumation of Jacob Wagner. There's photos of all of this in the newspaper. So you can see they actually exhumed another gentleman who we do not have time to talk about tonight. And so they exhumed them both at the same time. They were both in the Baltimore Hill Cemetery, and they were testing their organs for poison. And so Jacob Wagner, I think, was a little bit older than some of the others. He was, I think, 78 years old at the time that he had died. And so we'll hear a little bit more about him in a moment. George Heiss, this is George Heiss. And so he had befriended Anna. He had lent her money. When he went back to her and said, hey, it's time to repay this loan that I gave you, she said, give me time, I don't have it, give me time. And then she brought him over beer and spinach, which I think is a courting maneuver if you're German, I'm not sure. And after he ate it, he got very, very ill. He was hospitalized. He was partially paralyzed for the rest of his life. And throughout this whole investigation, he is hospital bound. And so when she is arrested and word gets out in the neighborhoods that she's been arrested, he volunteers very quickly to file charges against her because he had been trying to get someone to listen to him that she had poisoned him already. And so third and final is our Philip Hahn. Oh, I forgot, you guys. So that's highlighted, blonde is highlighted because in every article talking about her, they call out that she's blonde, and I was gonna say we should make it a drinking game. That every time it says blonde, we take a drink. Ugh. All right, that's okay. We're doing dry January, so that's okay. So Anna lived at a home, 2970 Coleraine Avenue. And there was actually a doctor's office also in the home. So there was like medicines and things around the house. Anna also claimed that the husband she had in Germany who died was a doctor. So she sort of had these weird connections to doctors and to medicine, but no actual medical training of her own. While she was away one day, her son was looking for a toy pistol in the couch and found a bottle with a skull and crossbones on it. And so he went and gave it to Philip and said, I think that this is a poison. And Philip's like, yep, that's a poison. And then Philip remembered the time last year where he got very, very ill and was hospitalized, and there was no explanation for what had happened to him. And so he thought, this is bad news. And he kept the bottle. He told her that he had it, but he kept the bottle. And they got into a big fight, a big enough fight that the neighbors could hear it. He said, you're not getting the bottle back. He took it with him when he left, and he actually didn't come back for a couple of weeks, probably because he had put two and two together that she was going to kill him. Investigation continues. It's ongoing. That bottle of poison, which they did test, is called croton oil, which is not something I had heard of before I started researching this. We always hear about arsenic. She was actually called Arsenic Anna sometimes in various newspapers. She did use that as well, but she liked, more obscure poisons. And so the reason to use croton is that a standard autopsy did not test for it. So a standard autopsy tested for arsenic if you had one, but croton, it dissipated faster in the organs and was less likely to be detected. And so the newspapers made it seem like she knew that because of the knowledge she had from various doctors. I think that might be a little bit of a stretch, and maybe it was just something she could get her hands on, but we'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say she was a little wicked and a little bit knowledgeable there. And so as this investigation is ongoing, there are more names added to the list of victims, and they all had three things in common. The first is they gifted or loaned her money, or stocks or assets, some other sort of stock or asset. They ended up either sick or dead. Not all of her victims died. And they enjoyed long walks on the beach, because everyone enjoys that. Everyone enjoys that. And so as they're questioning her about what happened in all of these various cases, they ask her, how did you get this house? Your husband is out of work more than he's in work. You have a gambling problem. Spoiler alert, she had a gambling problem. And so she's living in this house, and she says, oh, I got it in a will. I inherited it from family, right? Because when you inherit things from family, people say, oh, that's nice, they pass something down to you. When you inherit things from a near stranger, people think, oh, you killed that man, right? So she inherited it from family. She says she got it from her aunt and uncle. Friends of the man say, no, she got this from a man who's very suddenly died, and within knowing her for only 3 months, changed his will to give her everything. And so, which was it? Who owned the house before she owned the house? This is something we can look up with records that are freely available if you would like to be a history detective. And so the Hamilton County Auditor's website have record of this house. It is now a gas station slash like mini mart type place. And so that's the picture of it as it is today. There is an ownership log. And the ownership log, actually, if you look in the upper left, it starts with Anna. So whoever had it before her, not on this ownership log, but this, at some point in the 1930s, they started using these. She had the house by then, and so she's the first name on the log. And so how do we figure out who had the house before her? Quick newspaper search. The gentleman, whose name was Ernest Kohler, he got divorced. And so there were a lot of newspaper articles about his court proceedings from the divorce, which showed him as owning the house at 2970 Coleraine Avenue. So history detective work, we figure out she did get the house, not from family, but from Ernest. And so we also have his death certificate. And so you can see on here, she was actually the informant when he died. And so she's the person that reported that he had died. His actual cause of death was cancer. He did have cancer. The doctor who was treating him was the doctor that worked out of her house. And so I'm like, that guy's probably shady, right? And so, but you can also see here, it shows he lived at 2970 Coleraine Avenue. That's up at the top. Down under her name, she also lived at 2970 Coleraine Avenue. She was living with him at the time that he died. Her husband and son were as well. So they were all living in his house, and she was nursing him. And she said, he's an old family friend. He's basically family. That's why this was happening this way. And so his family sued her because they said it doesn't make sense that he would have changed his will to leave everything to this person that none of us knew. And she settled with him out of court for $4,000. And so she actually had to mortgage that house in order to pay off his relatives, which I think she did to make the questions go away of why this might have happened. She also, when she was the informant in his death, she had him cremated. So she claimed all the way till the end that she did nothing to hurt him and he passed away truly from the cancer, but the evidence is really kind of stacked against her. All right, so when she was asked by police why so many people, why she was associated with so many older people who passed away very suddenly, she said, I don't know what to tell you, I just love old people. Direct quote. And that is like going to a playground full of little kids and not having a little kid of your own, and a parent asks you why you're there, and you say, I just love little kids. You can't do that. You can't say it like that. And so she really didn't have a good reason for this. She did apply at one point to be a traveling nurse and to go to like retirement communities and assist people. She wasn't qualified, and so she wasn't hired. She wasn't allowed to do it. And so all through this is a media circus. She is on the front page of the newspaper every day for weeks. And at first, she didn't want to be shown. And, oh, that's Ernest. So, good Lord. All right, so she's covering her face because she doesn't want to be in the paper. And at some point right around here, she changes her tack and starts going for, I think, a charming the public kind of persona. She starts smiling. She starts talking about how innocent she is, probably hoping to lean on the charm that has gotten her this far to try to get out of this situation. So she is charged and she is arraigned. And hundreds of people show up at her arraignment, and 70% of them are women. Because even in 1930, women relaxed with true crime. We still do it today. We had to travel further to get there. But we will show up. We want to hear about the murder, and then we'll give you our opinions on what we would have done differently, either doing it ourselves or investigating. So this is our fast forward part. She is tried, she is convicted, she is sentenced to death. It's dramatic. At the time, Ohio was using the electric chair, and no woman had ever been electrocuted, put to death on the electric chair in the state of Ohio. And at that time, there had been 213 executions of that style. She was going to be the first woman. She had several stays of her execution. They go through the appeals process. You try all the different ways to, see if you can get out of it. She wanted it to be commuted to a life sentence, and all of those were denied. It ended with the governor. It always stops with the governor. They have the option to potentially change the sentence, and he declined to do that. And so before her death, which she thought right up to the end that it would get overturned, that she wouldn't actually be killed, right? No woman had been killed in the entire time they were using this electric chair in the state of Ohio. So she penned a lengthy confession. She was writing a memoir of her life at the time that she was killed. So she had 20 handwritten pages describing the crimes she had committed. She did not admit to all of them. But so she writes this confession, and she gives it to her attorney. And her attorney kind of teases it, says, she gave me all this paperwork. I think in there is a confession. You'll have to give me the weekend to read everything, and then I'll let everyone know where we're at. And they came forward and said, it is a confession, and we are looking for the highest bidder to buy it. And they were going to use the money to fund her son basically starting a new life. And so they asked for $75,000 to buy this confession, with the thought being that whoever bought it could syndicate it through newspapers all over the country and make money off of it that way. They didn't say the exact sum. They said it was nowhere near $75,000, but that actually a movie making company purchased it and then sold it to individual newspapers. And so in Cincinnati, it was sold to the Enquirer, but it was sold to a paper in Columbus and a paper in Dayton. And actually in the article itself, the top of the article says copyrighted, which you don't normally see in things that are printed in the newspaper. And so exclusively in the Enquirer, and they advertised this for multiple days. So it printed on a Monday and on a Tuesday. On Saturday and Sunday, they ran full page advertisements that the Monday and Tuesday paper would have this confession. And so this is a snippet of the actual handwriting. They got in one more time calling her blonde. And so in the actual confession, she admits to a handful of things, not really related to the murders themselves, that I thought were very interesting. And so she says she was never married in Germany. She was never married to the father of her son. She was 17 at the time that she got pregnant, and she thought she was going to marry this man. He was a doctor, and she thought her life was going to be set. And when she told that man that she was pregnant, he said, "This is really awkward. I'm already married." And that he wanted nothing to do with her or with their child. And so she wrote a whole page about how he had wanted her to get rid of the baby, and she refused. And she kind of argued, I can't be as much of a monster as you all think I am because I refuse to do this. And so she at various points in the confession tried to justify what she did by various things that happened in her life. One of them was that she had several head injuries as a child. So she was very ahead of her time, way before, Aaron Hernandez and concussions in football, and maybe they make you do bad things. But she said, I got knocked out riding a bike. I got knocked out skiing. It did something to me. It changed something in me. It made me a bad person. She talked about having a devil inside of her. It wasn't me that did these things. It was the devil that is inside of me sometimes. I don't know why it's there. And so she talked about hoping that when she passed away, that God would explain to her what possessed her to do these things, because it wasn't her that did them. And so she did say that Jacob Wagner, who we talked about, that in his death, that she had borrowed money from him and he had wanted her to pay him back. And she said, oh, I'm not ready. I don't have it yet. Just give me a little more time. And she borrowed the money from George Heiss to pay back Jacob Wagner. So she had a borrowing money from old people Ponzi scheme kind of going on, where she'd borrow from one to pay back another. And so when Jacob Wagner came and said, you still owe me more money, I need more, and she said, I don't have it, he said, well, you don't have to pay me back as long as you'll be my girlfriend now. And she said, I didn't want to do that. And who knows if that claim is actually true, right? Maybe he never said that, but that's what she claimed he said. And so she said, the only way out that I could see is I remembered I had this rat poison in the basement, and he brought over a tray of oysters. And so she spiked the oysters with poison and then had him eat them. And so she admitted to Jacob Wagner's death, Mr. Obendorfer, who was killed out in Colorado, George Gesselman, who was also exhumed out of Baltimore Hill Cemetery. She said she had never hurt Ernest Kohler, which is who she got the house from. Her aunt and uncle that she came and stayed with when she first came to the United States, they both died shortly after she arrived. She said she had nothing to do with that. And then their son-in-law, who she was briefly engaged to or promised to marry, also died shortly after. She married someone else and demanded that she give him back all the money he had given her under the promise that they would be wed. And so I found this to be an incredibly interesting story. And like I said, we skipped over a lot of the kind of good meaty bits. And as Mike was saying at the beginning, I'm posting on my Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube stories exactly like this. So I think the next one we're going to do is all the extra details of this. So if you'd like to find it, it's How Your Ancestors Died. Pretty much anywhere you can search for it. And thank you all so much.